Hey everybody, this is Peter Gregory, and this is an outtake of the email I sent to the Chelsea dinghy sailors after my last week, which was the fourth week of 8 here in the fall before the end of the year of frostbiting over in Barrington, Rhode Island. I was on Sunday, I was sailing sunfish, and I threw this rule out here, and Barry came back with some questions about it, and I'm going to go over some of the challenges that I have right now with some of the rules I'll share with you because I'm not sure how this is going to play out. I have some people to go talk to about this, but I thought I'd play this out. Is where does the truth lie in some of the items that occur out on the water when we kind of approach other boats and we have boats around us, and you have to think quickly about who's on what tack and which position in the wind you are. Okay, so I'm going to cover this with about three different views that we have here. This is the email that I put out. I'll go over this kind of quickly. The writing part up above here kind of starts presenting the case, and then I write down here at the bottom a little bit about what actually happened. And I say here, I'm really looking forward to the possibility of sharing rules discussions in the spring with the Chelsea people. That is, this was that came out of the email, and I think that there are some experts of rules within the club that hopefully before we get on the water, we can have a couple sessions and think things out. Okay, so maybe, as Barry mentioned, we can have some preseason days to discuss the rules. That is. And so with six short races in Big Current over in Barrington, that is, just the current, just like the Hudson. Okay, so this is pretty neat. Sailing in a narrow part of Narragansett Bay, its own channel. There's a lot of islands and channels and things. And so there's a narrow channel emptying out into a larger bit of a bay there, part of the bay. Very strong current. I'm going to say probably 5 knots. And this past weekend, we were sailing right between high and low tide. So you have the fastest current right then. So the current was outbound. When I got there, the water was very high, and that was from the storm Nicole that came through on the weekend. The water was very high up on the ramp part where we launched from, which makes it easier. All right, but so the current was raging out pretty much the whole time we were sailing, and we had a wind from approximately the same direction, which was northish. Okay, so what was happening was we were getting big shifts during the day, and the course would become very skewed. And that's what happens when you frostbite. First of all, you don't have a lot of help out on the water as much as you do during the summer. So you don't have as many people running around in boats resetting marks. And the wind was very shifty after Nicole. So even through the day, it was changing quite a bit. And so in frostbiting, you have a lot of races and you sail with the wind that you have, that you're dealt. Everybody has to deal with the same conditions, basically. Okay. So with the current, the mark roundings are really crowded in these short races. The pack is very tight. Okay. So you can't really establish too much distance between the pack. It's just one group going around the marks. We had 15 people, 14 boats on the water. Okay. So they're really crowded. Marks are really crowded, and your quick logic must prevail to sail without violating rules. My biggest takeaway from crowded sailing conditions, and that is through these frostbiting weekends, and this you might appreciate, is the highly cascaded rule invocation at the marks. Is what rule trips the next, which trips the next, or if everybody is prone to a rule, who has rights over the next? Because you have a lot of boats side by side and all over the place here. Okay, and I'm going to graphically show that in a little bit, what happened. So we may be stacked 5 to 6 boats wheelhousing around the mark, which creates some interesting opportunities and pitfalls. If you have someone with rights inside you, and that was the case that started presenting itself, you have to be calling the boats outside you for lots of room. So that was the first mistakes of getting back into frostbiting in crowded situations the first few weeks, is when there's a pack of boats, the upwind boat the upwind boat or the boat closest to the mark is going to have rights over the other boats. And they may be calling at you, and you're the next boat in line. After the first, you're the second. And to really clear the field or clear the water for that boat calling for room, you have to really be quickly yelling up the chain to get the others to move out of the way. Okay. So what happens if they don't move? Okay. And the boats are touching quite a bit in frostbiting. Hopefully not T-boning each other, but it is bumper boats. Okay. So we may be stacked 5 to 6 boats wheelhousing around the mark, either mark. When generally they're windward leeward. We do a few triangles. if you have someone with rights inside you, you have to be calling the boats outside you for lots of room. The inside boat controls the whole pack. All right. So if they really want that room, they have to be communicating very quickly. So the big question is about communicating. How much do they have to communicate, and how much do you just have to avoid them without them? What happens if they don't yell over to you and indicate that maybe it's going to be a little tight there? You have to give them some room. So if the inside boat starts calling for room, you have to immediately telegraph that to the outside boats for the same issue. Okay, because I can't go anywhere. I'm going to be smashing into boats, bearing off a little bit at the mark. So if not, it is a knot. Kind of used a little bit of a pun in there, but if not, it's a knot going around the mark. Total bumper boats, can't spell right. Total bumper boats, an ugly mess. I didn't have to call Rule 43, which is exoneration. Okay, so if you make them if you create a foul, but for some good reason you're exonerated from having to do your turns or suffering the consequences of the penalties. Okay, so you have to call Rule 43 exoneration. Anytime through the summer, I didn't have to do that, but it comes into play all the time now in frostbiting. So that's a really good thing about frostbiting is you're learning rules very quickly. You're also getting because you're packed in, you're also being very athletic and you're being very reactive and responsive and reflexive. You get reflexes going there. Okay, so here's Rule 43.1a. Exonerates a boat, this is word for word, exonerates a boat in any situation in which she's compelled to break a rule because another boat has broken a rule. So this means that the inside boat on the mark from me, I can't get out of the way. They hit me, which I basically is me hitting them. They need room. They hit me. They deserve the room they can take. Okay, so I would be bumping people above me, and so there's a whole bunch of bumping going on. All right, so Rule 43.1b exonerates a boat from breaches of certain rules when she's sailing within the room or mark room to which she's entitled. Okay, and I've played this each week at least once, and I've had to think about it because it's not a rule that I normally use. It's kind of deep. It's a high numbered rule, 43. Okay, so this past week, the course was highly skewed because of a major sustained wind shift during the race. It was, as again, I kind of prefaced this with the race committee could only keep up so much. There was only a couple boats on the water to run around and reset marks. So the big thing is when it's cold out is just keep sailing, and that's what they did. They kept us very little time between the end of one race and the beginning of another. And it's just part of frostbiting you deal with. You'd rather be racing under maybe compromised conditions a little bit than not racing. Okay, it's just sitting around waiting for them to reset a course. Okay, so we were reaching. Okay, so what happened was there's such a big wind shift that a windward leeward course was now like a reachy kind of thing from one mark to the other. Okay, so it's now a whole different weird setup because of the wind, and you have to start rethinking the rules quickly here. And that's a big point of what I'm bringing up is that you have to be kind of quick and know your major rules fast. So we were reaching around the windward mark. Now, after thinking about it, because it was so skewed when I wrote this, it was really the leeward mark, and I'm going to draw that. But it doesn't really change things too much, but I just want to be accurate. And it was the wind so skewed that you don't have boats sailing downwind with their boom way out, and then as they flip around the leeward mark, tacking back and forth up the course again. We were reaching across to, in air quotes, the leeward mark, and the boats that had turned already were reaching back, okay? Because that's how much it almost was a 90-degree shift in the wind for this. And I'll draw that and make it a little clearer when I draw it. So we were reaching around the windward mark. I had starboard boat that had cleared the mark heading my way. Now they're coming back at me. All right. And we were now leeward of that boat. So that's what's strange about the wind shift is normally they would be leeward of us coming downwind. A boat starting to beat back up below us would actually be leeward of us. That's one set of rule that we have to think about there. It's one of the rules that says the leeward boat has the windward boat has to give way to a leeward boat. So that's what really the point of the discussion here is like all of a sudden things change and your rules have to, and knowing what they are under the conditions is very important. So they had cleared, this one boat had cleared the mark heading. They're headed almost straight at me. and they have rights, okay? And I'll tell you why, because they were on starboard, I'm on port with this other boat that was below me. But a boat I was racing against below me, I think, but a boat I was racing against below me, I had the boat below me, technically below me, leeward to me. So would they have rights over me? We were on port tack. Technically, under the rule of them being leeward, they could drive me up. But now I have a boat I have to keep clear of, which I could not cross their path. It was getting so close that now I couldn't go above them with that oncoming boat. But the picture will clear that up in a second here. Okay. I got sandwiched between the oncoming rights boat and the leeward boat that was below me, the leeward port boat below me. And I didn't clear the leeward boat. I needed room. I raked my boom along their sail against their mast. It was cling clangy, very clunky, not very smooth move there. No damage was done. And I'm thinking really quickly, okay, so as a windward boat, did I get in their way? Did I not keep clear? But no, I had a boat that I had to keep clear of that I needed to have communicated to this boat that was lured to me that they need to give me some room. I have to get out of the way of this oncoming boat. Okay, so that's what the pickle developed into. Okay, and so I didn't clear the lured boat. I needed room. I raked my boom across them. So you really have to be thinking on your feet the whole time. I had to run the scenario through my head afterward, and I'm doing that now with all you, to dissect what really actually happened. So here's the rules question. Is it the leeward boat's responsibility to know I need room? They have to be seeing everything? They have to, give way? Or do I have to call it to her? It was a female sailor. Okay? So that question is, what do you think? Okay? It's always good to leave it like that without saying what the answer is. And I actually haven't cleared out what the answer is on this yet. And we'll clear that up in further discussions, whether there's an expert at the club or not that can answer that. All right. So a couple of things I'm going to share with you here is I believe I sent this out to many of you. Where'd it go? Okay. So I think in one email, what I have here is a PDF. And this is the world sailing version of the rules, not the U.S. sailing version of the rules. And as far as I know, they're almost exactly the same except for appendices. I believe that they're virtually the same except for there's a couple extra appendices that we've used through the summer here with sunfish sailing in regattas. Okay, so I think I sent that out. This is really good, is to start looking through this and find out where the rules are. They have a really nice. The world sailing rules are nice. They have this opening with all these pennants, all the sailing racing pennants that you might encounter in there. So that's kind of helpful. All right. They actually have nice cards that you can mount on your the deck of your boat that just remove any question. And even top sailors put those on their boats so they don't have to remember all of them. I try to remember them. I don't have the sticker on there. Okay. So it's broken down into numbers of parts. Okay. So we're going to come into this. A lot of definitions of terms up front here so that the rules make a little bit of sense. The rules have really come forward since I was using them last. They've really had to minimize them. So these rules are extremely efficient, and that's a problem because it doesn't have the nuance in them. And the nuance comes through discussion and figuring that out. And there's some classic examples for every rule that they can give that do add nuance that comes from a different document. Okay, so when we get to the section here, we're on to page 16 of almost 160. The part one are some very fundamental rules, like the first one's about safety, fair sailing. I'll give you an example. These first 6 rules here, the fair sailing rule, the example that they give is if you're sailing an experienced person against a newbie, and the experienced sailor is really on port and screams starboard to confuse the newbie, they could get thrown out of the race and penalized because that's not fair sailing. There was a point, I believe it was in the rules, it's called Corinthian sailing. You'll see that once in a while. You all might know, anything I'm saying here, you all might know about or even know more than I know about it. But there is a term out there called do you sail Corinthian, meaning polite, I guess is the way to say it. All right, so there's a couple other rules in there that have to do with like world sailing regulations about advertising and things like that. But safety is good that it's the first rule of all the rules here. Okay, fair sailing the second. Okay, this is the part where we'll get into. And, if you get into racing, if you know the first three rules of part two, you've got 80% of it knocked, and you can go into a race just knowing these three rules. Okay, and these are the only three that we're going to talk about that really affect what I'm talking about, other than exoneration, which is 43. So, just as a note, it's kind of curious that we don't have a 7, 8, or 9. A rule 7, 8, or 9 don't exist anymore. And that's just because they got known by their numbers, that they don't want to change the numbers and reorder these because people know them by the number. They go back a long time. So somewhere along the way, 7, 8, and 9 were found to be redundant and they got rid of them. So, okay, so 10. So we jumped from 6 to 10. So the top level rule would be that a port tack boat has to keep clear of a starboard tack boat. They've, the wordage of this is done by lawyers, literal lawyers, to get this down to the most exact precision wordage that they can. And you'll notice they don't use the word right. Where's the word right in here is not used. Let me come back in here again. And so on opposite tacks, it doesn't say that the starboard tack boat has rights over a port tack boat. No, they found that the best way to describe it is that a port tack boat shall keep clear of a starboard tack. So that's the trump card. If you're on starboard, the other boat's on port, you have rights. Okay, now if the boats happen to be on the same tack, then it depends on their position regarding the wind. Which one is windward and which one is leeward. Okay, so this one says that when they're overlapped, a windward boat has to keep clear of a leeward boat. Okay, so the first rule says starboard rules. Starboard ranks. If you're on starboard, you rank above a port boat. Then the second rule says that if you're on the same tack, then the leeward boat has rights. As a windward boat, if you start falling off, you can't fall off into the boat below you. You have to tack out of there if they're pointing higher than you are, and if you're falling off on them. It's just to give you an example there. Okay, so that's overlapped windward leeward. Okay, and then finally, it has to do with when boats, one's forward, they're not overlapped, one's forward of the other. This boat on same tack, not overlapped. When boats are on the same tack and not overlapped, a boat clear astern shall keep clear of a boat clear ahead. That means you can't bump the transom with your bow of the boat ahead of you. All right. The sweet short version of it is you can't just smash into the transom of a boat ahead of you. And it's really these three rules that get you to 80% of the way through racing. Okay, so I went through the email, and then this is a kind of an examination and use of the racing rules of sailing, and they'll be the same for the U.S. sailing version as the world sailing. And they confer with each other. They figure out how to coordinate things and what would be different. Okay, so the next thing I want to just pull out here is this neat tool that somebody just sent to me 2 or 3 weeks ago. The Rochester Frostbiting Group sent this to me. They sent it out to everybody. Say, hey, listen, there's this free tool out here to discuss the kind of things that I was just discussing. So what was the actual, what's the setup here for the course? And this is a really neat tool. I learned it without reading anything. I just started clicking on things and it started happening. Okay, so we have 3 boats. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 boats up here. I'm going to make myself B eventually. So I'm going to put 3 boats up there. So there we have them. Okay, so we need some marks set up. We're going to set up the committee boats and whatnot. So what we're going to do is the first thing is I'm going to make the first mark a line. Okay, so there's our committee boat. And I can move this down. So that's the pin. That's the flotation. Here's the committee boat, and this is the starting line. Okay, so we have mark 2 we'll make windward, and mark 3 we'll make leeward. Okay, so that's our windward leeward course. Okay, so I'm going to draw this according to how it actually happened. I had it when I thought about it again. The wind was so skewed that I was thinking it was windward, and it was actually the leeward mark. Okay, so let's throw some wind in here. All right, so we'll get some wind, and this is where the wind was coming from. Now, in a perfect world, the wind would look like this. Okay, the wind is normally they set up the course right into the wind. Okay, but that's not what was happening. So what we ended up happening was the wind skewed around. I had to remember how this went. The wind skewed around like this. So this is like about where the wind is. That's how badly. It was almost 90 degrees off. Let's call it about there. All right. So let's throw some current in here. So here's our current indicator. All right. And the current was roughly like that. So the tide was going out. All right. So here's our course. And, you can't do too much about the current. You set up your course to the wind, and the wind had started out of coming down from the top of the page here, but it had shifted around so much that it had gotten really, really skewed. So we have to work with the leeward mark. And so I'm just going to kind of move these things a little bit. It's not to scale and position and whatever. And I'm going to make them a little bit crooked like this because during the day, the wind was shifting around and we didn't have people to move marks around. And so it got a little bit skewed. Let's make it kind of a little bit of a messed up course going on here. So we're going to do, the A had gone around the mark, and I have to make starboard. Okay, so it's starboard. So that's the setup here. Okay, and we're all reaching. Okay, and then I'm going to make myself B. I was over here. Let's turn us around. Okay, and I was air's coming. We're port, so I'm a port boat here, and the same thing with C. We're going to turn C around like this. And this is the basic setup of what was going on. It was disorienting. I want to throw that in here. It was a little disorienting with the wind where it was. Okay, so let's even, this is a little bit, remember there's a current. So what we were doing is we're trying to hold high here so the current, we didn't get swept way down to go around the mark. Okay, and A was probably getting swept down a little bit. So this is beginning to look like the setup that I have, and I have to watch out for this boat. In fact, A was drifting down, and this is what became happening. And what ended up happening is I didn't quickly enough call out for C and raked over the boat there, and we did the mark turn. And this is what's going to happen to you. I think this portrays a pretty good idea of what happens on the water. You have to immediately think about where the wind's coming from, who had rights over who, and whatnot. And this is the point where, do we need to yell out and indicate to a boat that needs to give room, or are they supposed to know it? And if we don't yell out, can they? Who would win in protest after the race? And one thing I'm going to do is recommend that we do go to protest. That's the way you're going to learn. You need to get a bunch of minds on it, and especially like in a time like frostbiting or club sailing or whatever, it leads to better sailing. I felt really bad. Okay, so this is what happens. I felt really bad that it was obvious. I'm like raking across the boat, and my boom's scraping the mast, and we pop out and we turn around. We turn ourselves around and we run the rest of the race. And immediately I'm thinking about, did I need to do a turn back there? Okay, and not only that, we were within the zone, which is 3 boat lengths. I can actually turn the zone on, but it's kind of too big on this. The scale isn't right. So on Mark 3, I can put the zone on. So I can click on the zone, and this shows you the 3 boat length. This is the zone. We're in the zone, but I don't have enough room to, kind of show. It's just too large, the scale of it, for what we're showing here. So we were in the zone on that. Let me turn that back off again. Okay, so I'll turn that off. That's the question. Do I have to indicate to that leeward boat here who I need to not interfere with, or should they be aware of the fact that I was coming in and needed, this boat's drifting down on me? All right, I'm trying to hold up to stay close to the mark and make a nice tight mark rounding like that. And, it was probably more like something like this as it was happening. We were that close, something like that. There you go. So there was a lot of words, but this tool is really neat. You might want to check it out. It's simply racetack.com/sailboard.htm. Okay. And they just put this up. Someone wrote it during the COVID time who had time on their hand. They were a programmer, and it is just really good. It's taken off like wildfire. People are using it, and it's free, and very useful. I didn't even have to think. I just started pushing things around, and it started working. So there you go. Do I have to let somebody know that I need room, or are they supposed to know it? So this ran a lot longer than I thought it was going to do, but hopefully that made sense enough that we can talk about it. Now I'll send this out to you all, post it on my YouTube channel, and I will also be taking video. I'll be hooking up video on my boat for the rest of the season here. I have 4 more weeks before the end of the year of sailing, and then the 2 different fleets I'm sailing in, the schedule splits and they don't overlap as much, and that might affect how many times I go up to Rhode Island. We'll see. Okay, hope you're all enjoying the time off the water. Don't get too far away from it. Keep your head into the game, and we can actually hold a couple sessions at night if anybody wants to do that for talking about rules like this. Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.